Ethan Carter adjusted his stiff ambassador uniform and took a deep breath. The massive golden doors of the Zarian palace loomed before him, shining under the twin suns of the alien world. As humanity's representative, he was here to strengthen diplomatic ties with the mighty Zarian Empire. He had prepared for weeks, memorizing their customs and traditions, but nothing could shake the feeling that something would go wrong. The doors opened, revealing the grand throne room. Towering Zarian warriors lined the hall, their gleaming armor making them look even more intimidating. The air was thick with the scent of alien spices and burning incense. At the far end, seated on a throne made of obsidian and glowing crystals, was Queen Silara. She was tall, powerful, and undeniably regal. Unlike the armored warriors, she wore a flowing black and gold robe, decorated with intricate patterns. Her piercing golden eyes studied Ethan as he approached, her expression unreadable. Ethan forced himself to stay calm. He had faced high-ranking politicians, space tycoons, and even warlords before, but standing before a warrior queen who ruled one of the most powerful alien empires was something else. He cleared his throat and gave a respectful bow, just as he had practiced. That's when everything went wrong. The Zarian nobles gasped, murmuring in shock. Some of the guards reached for their weapons. Ethan's heart pounded. What just happened? Queen Silara stood up slowly, her gaze locked onto Ethan. A small smirk played on her lips. "Human, do you understand what you have just done?" she asked, her voice carrying through the throne room like rolling thunder. Ethan swallowed hard. He had simply bowed, a normal diplomatic gesture. "Right? I was just showing respect, Your Majesty," he said carefully. Silara's smirk grew wider. "Respect. In our culture, that gesture is not mere respect. It is a proposal." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. His brain struggled to process what he just heard. "A proposal?" he repeated, his voice almost cracking. "Yes," Silara confirmed, stepping closer. "In Zarian tradition, that bow is a formal request for union, a marriage proposal." Ethan's jaw nearly hit the floor. This had to be a joke, a misunderstanding. There was no way he had just proposed to the queen of an alien empire. The court erupted into excited whispers. Some nobles looked pleased, while others looked furious. The guards who had tensed moments ago were now standing in a more relaxed stance, as if they were waiting for a royal declaration. Ethan tried to find a way out. "This is a mistake. I didn't mean." Silara raised a hand, silencing him. "Intentions do not matter. The act has been performed. And She paused, tilting her head as if considering something. Then, with a graceful smile, she said, "I accept." The room exploded into cheers. Warriors banged their fists against their chests in approval. Servants hurried away, already making preparations. Somewhere in the crowd, a noble muttered, "A bold move by the human. Intriguing." Ethan stood frozen, his mind racing. This was supposed to be a simple diplomatic meeting. Now he was apparently engaged to an alien queen. How had his life gone so wrong in just 5 minutes? Ethan Carter stood frozen in the grand throne room of the Zarian palace, his brain refusing to accept reality. Did the queen really just accept his accidental proposal? This was supposed to be a simple diplomatic mission, not a royal engagement. Around him, the Zarian nobles and warriors were celebrating as if this was the greatest event in their history. Servants hurried about, and alien musicians began playing a strange but lively melody. Ethan's stomach twisted. "I need to fix this. Fast." He turned to Queen Silara, who stood tall and confident, watching him with an amused expression. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "Your Majesty," Ethan said carefully, "there's been a misunderstanding. In human culture, a bow is just a sign of respect. I didn't mean to propose." The court fell silent. Every Zarian in the room turned to stare at him, their golden eyes filled with shock. A few warriors gripped their weapons, as if he had just said something offensive. Silara arched an eyebrow, stepping closer. "So, you did not intend to offer yourself as my consort." Her voice was calm, but there was a sharpness beneath it. Ethan felt 100 powerful warriors watching his every move. He swallowed hard. "No, your majesty. I mean no disrespect, but this was a mistake." The silence grew heavier. Then one of the older nobles stepped forward, his ridged face twisted in anger. "To withdraw a proposal after it has been accepted is an insult to the crown." Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Ethan's heart pounded. Silara studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Unfortunately, he is correct." Ethan felt like someone had just punched him in the gut. "Wait. What?" The queen folded her arms, her gaze sharp. "In Zarian law, once a proposal is made and accepted, it cannot be undone. To do so would bring shame upon the throne. The only way to avoid dishonor is through exile or execution." Ethan's blood ran cold. Execution. He forced a nervous chuckle. "I'm guessing exile isn't as simple as catching the shuttle back to Earth." Silara smirked. "Exile means banishment to the wild regions of Zarian Prime, where creatures far stronger than my warriors roam freely. You would not last long." Ethan's stomach dropped. He glanced around, searching for some loophole, some escape. There was none. The Zarians weren't angry with him. They were simply bound by their traditions. If he insisted on breaking the engagement, they would have no choice but to enforce the punishment. He exhaled slowly. "Okay, let's say I go along with this. What exactly does being your consort mean?" Silara smiled, clearly entertained by his struggle. "It means you will remain at my side, serve as my advisor, and uphold the honor of our union. Of course, you will also be under constant scrutiny, and the target of those who seek power." Ethan frowned. "Wait, target? What do you mean?" A different noble stepped forward. "Not all in the Empire will accept a human consort. Some will see you as a weakness. Others will see this as an opportunity to strike against the throne. You may not have wished for this union, human, but now that it exists, you have made enemies." Ethan rubbed his temples. "Of course. First, he accidentally proposed to an alien queen. Now, he had assassins waiting for their chance to strike. Could this day get any worse?" Before he could think of a response, the palace doors burst open. A Zarian warrior rushed inside, his armor scratched and scorched. "My queen." There was an ambush on the city outskirts. Unknown assailants attacked our patrols. They are targeting the palace. Ethan cursed under his breath. Silara remained calm, her golden eyes burning with fury. "It seems your enemies are already making their move, human." She turned to her guards. "Prepare for battle. Defend the palace at all costs." Ethan clenched his fists. He had wanted to avoid getting involved, but now he had no choice. If he was truly in danger, then he had to fight for survival. Like it or not, he was part of this empire now. Ethan Carter barely had time to process his situation before the palace erupted into chaos. An attack, right after his accidental engagement. The timing was too perfect. Someone wanted to eliminate him and Queen Silara before their union could be solidified. The queen's golden eyes burned with fury as she turned to her warriors. "Defend the palace. No one breaches the throne room." Zarian guards immediately rushed to secure the doors, drawing their curved energy blades. The sound of combat echoed from outside, clashes of metal, alien weapons firing, and the roars of battle-hardened warriors. Ethan clenched his fists. "I take it this isn't normal." Silara glanced at him. "It is not. This is a direct challenge to my rule. And now, to yours as well. Mine." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. He never asked to be involved in an intergalactic political battle. But here he was. A thunderous boom shook the palace walls. The great doors trembled as something massive slammed against them. The warriors braced themselves, gripping their weapons tightly. Ethan's heart pounded. No way was he just standing here while a war broke out. He wasn't a soldier, but he had been in dangerous situations before, negotiating peace on unstable planets, handling space pirates, and even surviving a shuttle crash on an asteroid. "Do you have weapons for me?" Ethan asked. Silara arched an eyebrow. "You would fight?" Ethan smirked. "I'd rather not die, Your Majesty." The Queen let out a small chuckle before gesturing to a nearby warrior. "Give him a weapon." A Zarian soldier handed Ethan a plasma blade. Its hilt heavier than he expected. When he activated it, a vibrant blue energy blade hummed to life. "Not bad," Ethan muttered, testing its weight. The doors shuddered again, and then they exploded inward. A massive armored figure stormed in, standing nearly 8 feet tall. Its armor was pitch black, its helmet concealing its face. Behind it, several rogue Zyrian warriors charged in, weapons drawn. "Traitors," Silara hissed. The lead attacker pointed at Ethan. "This weak creature cannot be our queen's consort. The throne belongs to the strong." Ethan sighed. Of course, assassins, rebels, and now a fight to prove himself. "Your Majesty," Ethan said, stepping forward, blade in hand. "I think this is where I show them humans aren't weak." Silara's lips curled into a smirk. "Do not disappoint me, human." The battle began. The first attacker swung his blazing axe at Ethan. He barely dodged, rolling to the side before slashing with his plasma blade. Sparks flew as their weapons collided. Another warrior lunged at him, but Ethan ducked low, sweeping his blade across the enemy's leg. The Zarian warrior roared in pain before Ethan knocked him unconscious with the hilt of his sword. Around him, Silara's warriors engaged in brutal combat. The throne room became a battlefield, energy weapons clashing, warriors grunting, the scent of burning metal filling the air. Silara herself moved like a shadow and flame, her twin energy blades cutting through traitors with deadly precision. Ethan barely had time to admire her skill before the massive leader charged him. The brute swung his heavy axe, and Ethan barely blocked in time. The force sent him sliding backward. "You are unworthy," the brute growled. Ethan gritted his teeth. "That's funny. I was just thinking the same about you." The brute roared and attacked again. This time, Ethan didn't dodge. He sidestepped, allowing the brute's momentum to throw him off balance. Taking his chance, Ethan lunged forward and slammed his plasma blade into the enemy's armor, cutting deep into the shoulder. Sparks flew, and the brute howled in pain. But instead of falling, the brute grabbed Ethan by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Ethan struggled, gasping for air. His vision blurred. He swung his blade wildly, but the brute's grip was too strong. "Enough." Silara's voice rang through the throne room. In a flash, she leaped forward, her twin swords slicing in a deadly arc. The brute's grip loosened as his weapon clattered to the floor. He stumbled, eyes wide with shock before collapsing. Ethan fell to the ground, coughing and gasping for breath. He looked up to see Silara standing over him, her golden eyes burning with intensity. "Not bad," she said, offering him a hand. Ethan smirked, taking it. "Not bad yourself, Your Majesty." The last of the traitors were defeated, and silence fell over the throne room. Silara turned to her warriors. "Take the prisoners. We will find out who sent them." The soldiers saluted, dragging the unconscious attackers away. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead. Well, that was exciting. Silara crossed her arms. "You fought well, human. Perhaps you are not as weak as some believed." Ethan chuckled. "I'd rather prove myself some other way. Maybe with words, not weapons." The Queen smirked. "Then survive the political battlefield, and perhaps I will allow that." Ethan sighed. What had he gotten himself into? Ethan sat on the edge of an ornate stone bench in Queen Silara's private chamber, catching his breath. The battle in the throne room had left his body aching, but at least he was alive. Silara stood nearby, gazing out of a tall, arched window that overlooked the sprawling city of Xerius. The twin moons cast a silver glow over the rooftops, their reflection shimmering in her golden eyes. "You fight well for a diplomat," she said without turning around. Ethan let out a tired chuckle. "You'd be surprised how often negotiations turn violent in deep space." She turned to face him, arms crossed. "But this was different. Someone wanted you dead, Ethan. Someone who fears what your presence means." Ethan frowned. "Because I accidentally proposed to you." Silara nodded. "To my enemies, you are a problem. They fear that if I accept you as my consort, I will grow stronger, that I will change our empire in ways they cannot control." Ethan rubbed his temples. "Great. So I didn't just get engaged by mistake. I also stepped into the middle of an alien power struggle." Silara smirked. "Welcome to royal life." A knock at the chamber door interrupted them. A Xyrian advisor, dressed in flowing purple robes, stepped inside. His blue skin shimmered under the soft candlelight. "My queen," he bowed. "We have captured one of the rebel leaders. He is willing to talk." Silara's expression hardened. "Bring him to the lower chambers. We will question him ourselves." The advisor hesitated, glancing at Ethan. "Shall the human join?" Silara looked at Ethan thoughtfully before giving a slight nod. "Yes, he should hear this as well." Ethan sighed and stood up. "Guess I should start acting like a future consort, huh?" Silara gave him an amused look. "We shall see if you are worthy of that title." The interrogation. The lower chambers of the palace were dimly lit, carved from black stone. Ethan followed Silara down a narrow corridor until they reached a small room. Inside, a wounded Xerian warrior sat restrained, his arms bound behind him. His red eyes glowed with defiance as Silara entered. "My queen," he spat bitterly, "you disgraced the throne by bringing the human here." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Nice to meet you too." Silara stepped forward, her presence commanding. "Who sent you? Who dares challenge my rule?" The warrior smirked. "You are not as feared as you think, Silara. Many believe your reign must end." Ethan watched as Silara remained calm and composed, though her fingers twitched slightly, a sign of her restraint. "And yet you failed," she said coolly. The warrior's expression faltered. "Perhaps, but I am only a soldier. There are others, stronger, more determined." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "And let me guess, they don't like me either." The warrior turned his glare on him. "You are an outsider, a weakling. You think you can stand beside a queen, that you can rule. You are nothing." Ethan sighed. "You know, everyone keeps underestimating humans, but somehow we always end up proving them wrong." The warrior scowled but said nothing. Silara leaned down, her golden eyes piercing. "Give me a name. Who leads this rebellion?" The warrior hesitated. Then he spoke a single word. "Lord Veros." Silara's expression darkened instantly. Ethan noticed the shift in her energy. "I take it you know him." Silara stood upright, her voice like steel. "Veros is a former general, exiled for attempting to overthrow my father. He has been in hiding for years, until now." Ethan frowned. "So he's back, and he's after the throne." Silara nodded. "And he sees you as a threat to his plans." Ethan crossed his arms. "Well, that's just great." The warrior let out a chuckle. "Your time is running out, Queen. Veros will come for you. And when he does, this human will be the first to fall." Silara's eyes flashed with fury. "Enough." With a flick of her wrist, she signaled the guards to take the prisoner away. As the warrior was dragged out, Ethan turned to Silara. "So, what now?" Silara exhaled slowly, her gaze distant. "We prepare. If Veros is moving, then war is coming." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "And I'm supposed to be part of this now, huh?" Silara looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You are no longer just an outsider, Ethan. Like it or not, You are bound to this kingdom now. Ethan sighed. Guess I better start learning how to be a royal consort, then. Silara smirked. That, and how to survive. Ethan stood on the palace balcony, looking out at the city of Xerius. The air was tense. The people below were whispering about war, about General Verosk's return. Ethan could see it in their eyes, fear and uncertainty. Behind him, Silara approached, her golden eyes sharp with thought. You seem troubled, she said. Ethan let out a dry chuckle. Well, forgive me if I'm still processing the fact that an alien warlord wants me dead. Silara smirked slightly. You are not alone in this, Ethan. If Verosk wants my throne, he will have to fight for it, and I do not plan to lose. Ethan turned to face her. But can you win? Silara's smirk faded. Verosk has been planning this for years. He has loyal followers, hidden armies. He will not attack openly. He will strike where we least expect it. Ethan crossed his arms. Then we need to be ready. We need to strike first. Silara raised an eyebrow. You suggest we attack before he does. Ethan nodded. He thinks he has the advantage. But if we find his forces before they are ready, we can break them. Silara was silent for a moment, considering his words. There may be a way, she said at last. But it is dangerous. Ethan sighed. Of course it is. A dangerous plan. Moments later, Ethan and Silara entered the war chamber. High-ranking advisors stood around a holographic table, displaying a map of the Empire. One of Silara's commanders, a tall Xerian with dark blue skin and silver markings, spoke first. Our spies have confirmed that Verosk's forces are gathering in the shadow region of Krythos. If he builds strength there, he will march toward the capital soon. Silara tapped the table. Then we attack first. We must cut off his supplies and scatter his forces before he is fully prepared. One of the advisors shook his head. It is too risky. If we fail, he will retaliate with full force. Ethan spoke up. What if we don't send an army? What if we send a small team instead? The room fell silent. Silara looked at him curiously. You suggest an infiltration mission. Ethan nodded. If we go in quietly, we can sabotage his supplies, weaken his troops, and gather intel on his next move. The commander frowned. That would require skilled warriors. And luck. Silara turned to Ethan. Are you willing to take this risk? Ethan sighed. I think I lost my chance to say no the moment I accidentally proposed to you. Silara chuckled softly, then nodded. Very well. We leave tonight. Into enemy territory. The sky was dark and heavy with mist as Ethan, Silara, and a small team of elite Xerian warriors moved through the rocky valleys of Krythos. The region was desolate, the ground cracked from ancient battles. Ethan adjusted the alien armor he had borrowed. It was lighter than human armor, but just as strong. He gripped his blaster tightly. Stay low, Silara whispered. We are close. Up ahead, they could see Verosk's hidden outpost. It was built into the side of a canyon, surrounded by towering cliffs. Ethan could make out guard patrols, supply crates, and war machines being prepared. Looks like they're getting ready for a full invasion, Ethan muttered. Silara nodded. Then we strike before they can. She gave silent hand signals, and her warriors moved into position. Ethan turned to her. What's the plan? She smirked. You and I will plant explosives near their supply caches. Once we detonate them, the others will take care of the rest. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Just you and me. Alone. Inside the enemy base. Silara grinned. You wanted to be my consort, did you not? Ethan groaned. This is not how I imagined royal duties. The mission begins. Moving silently through the shadows, Ethan and Silara slipped into the outpost. The air was filled with the scent of metal and fuel. They avoided patrols, moving toward the supply area. Large crates of weapons and food were stacked high. Silara knelt, placing a small energy charge on one of the crates. This will destroy most of their supplies, but we need to place more to make sure. Ethan nodded and placed his own charge on another stack. He moved quickly, adrenaline rushing through his veins. Then he heard footsteps. He turned and saw a Zyrian guard approaching. Ethan froze. The guard's red eyes narrowed as he spotted him. For a second, there was silence. Then the guard reached for his weapon. Ethan reacted fast. He lunged, grabbing the guard's wrist and twisting it. The weapon clattered to the ground. The guard tried to shout, but Ethan punched him hard, knocking him out cold. Scilara looked at him with approval. Not bad, for a diplomat. Ethan smirked. I told you, negotiations don't always go peacefully. The escape. With all the charges placed, Scilara pressed a button on her wrist device. Time to go, she whispered. They moved swiftly back toward the exit. But as they neared the canyon's edge, alarms suddenly blared. They know we're here, Ethan shouted. Scilara cursed. Move. Guards poured into the area, weapons drawn. Blaster fire erupted, lighting up the night sky. Ethan ducked behind a crate and fired back. Scilara fought beside him, her movements swift and deadly. We need to set off the charges. Now, Ethan yelled. Scilara pressed a button. A massive explosion shook the ground. Flames erupted from the supply area, and the outpost was thrown into chaos. The distraction gave them the opening they needed. Go, 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 Scilara ordered. They sprinted toward the valley, where their team was waiting with transport ships. As they leaped inside, the ship's engines roared to life, lifting them away just as more explosions tore through the enemy base. Ethan collapsed into a seat, breathing hard. Well, that went well. Scilara sat beside him, smiling. You did good, human. Ethan grinned. Maybe I do have what it takes to be a consort after all. Scilara chuckled. We shall see. The war is only beginning. As their ship soared into the night, Ethan knew there was no turning back now. The air was thick with tension. Ethan stood in the royal war chamber, surrounded by Sciara's commanders and advisors. The infiltration mission had been a success. They had destroyed Verosk's supply caches, but the warlord was still coming. A holographic map of the Empire floated above the table. Red markers blinked, showing the movements of Verosk's forces. He had accelerated his attack. His armies were marching toward the capital city of Xirius. Sciara's golden eyes were sharp. He has no choice now. Without supplies, he must strike before his forces starve. We have forced his hand. One of her commanders, a scared Zyrian warrior, frowned. But his army is still powerful. He has war machines, trained soldiers, and hidden allies. Ethan crossed his arms. Then we need to even the odds. Scilara turned to him. Do you have a plan, human? Ethan smirked. Of course I do, but it's crazy. Scilara grinned. Good. Tell me. A risky strategy. Ethan moved closer to the holographic map. Verosk expects a traditional battle. He thinks we will meet him on the open plains. The warriors nodded. That was Zyrian tradition. Two armies clashing head-on. But we're not going to do that, Ethan continued. Instead, we hit him before he reaches the capital. Scilara leaned forward. An ambush. Ethan nodded. We use the terrain to our advantage. The canyon pass outside Xirius is narrow. If we set explosives and traps, we can force his army into chaos. One of the commanders frowned. That is not how Xirians fight. Ethan sighed. Yeah, well, it's how humans fight when we're outnumbered. Scilara smirked. I like it. We fight smart, not just strong. She turned to her warriors. Prepare the defenses. We will fight like humans. The calm before the storm. The night before the battle, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stood outside on the palace balcony, looking at the moonlit city. In a few hours, war would come to these streets. Scilara approached quietly. You should rest. Ethan chuckled. Hard to sleep when a warlord wants your head. Silara studied him. You are a strange man, Ethan. You did not ask for this, yet you stand and fight. Ethan sighed. Maybe I'm just bad at running away. Silara tilted her head. Or maybe you care more than you admit. There was silence for a moment. Then Silara spoke again, softer this time. If we survive this, Ethan, what will you do? Ethan exhaled. Honestly, I have no idea. Silara smirked. Then perhaps you should stay and figure it out. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Is that an invitation? Silara smiled. It is a challenge. Ethan grinned. I do like a challenge. The war was coming, but at that moment, Ethan wasn't thinking about the battle. The battle begins. The next morning, the ground trembled as Verosk's army approached. The warlord's forces marched through the narrow canyon, unaware that Ethan and Silara's warriors were waiting above. Ethan crouched behind a rock formation, gripping a detonator in his hand. Wait for it, he whispered. Verosk's war machines rolled forward, their heavy cannons aimed at the city. His warriors, clad in dark armor, moved like a tide of destruction. Ethan's heart pounded. If this failed, Xerus would fall. Then Silara gave the signal. Now, Ethan pressed the detonator. The explosives erupted, causing the canyon walls to collapse. Massive boulders crashed down, crushing war machines and scattering soldiers. Then the Xyrian warriors attacked. From the cliffs, arrows, energy blasts, and firebombs rained down. Warriors leaped from the rocks, engaging in fierce combat. Verosk's army was trapped. Ethan pulled out his blaster and joined the fight. He wasn't a soldier, but he had come too far to back down now. The duel. The battlefield was chaos. Smoke and fire filled the air. Then, through the dust, a massive figure emerged. General Verosk. He was taller than Silara, his muscular form clad in dark battle armor. His crimson eyes burned with rage as he swung a massive plasma blade. Ethan froze. This was the moment he had dreaded. Verosk's voice boomed. You, the weakling human. Silara stepped forward, her own energy blade igniting. If you want him, you'll have to go through me. Verosk laughed. Gladly. He lunged, and the battle between the queen and the warlord began. Ethan watched in awe. Silara fought like a storm, her movements swift and precise. But Verosk was powerful. Each strike of his blade sent shockwaves through the ground. Ethan realized Silara was struggling. He had to do something. Spotting a fallen soldier's weapon, Ethan grabbed a shock grenade. Silara, get down. She ducked just as Ethan threw the grenade. Boom. Verosk was hit by the blast, electricity crackling over his armor. Silara took the opening. She slashed her blade across his chest, sending him crashing to the ground. The warlord struggled, growling in fury, but he was beaten. Silara stood over him, her blade at his throat. It's over, Verosk, she said coldly. The warlord glared at her. Finish it. Silara hesitated. Ethan stepped forward. Killing him won't bring peace. Let him live, but make sure he can never rise again. Silara studied Ethan for a moment. Then she deactivated her blade. Verosk scowled. You are weak. Silara smirked. No, I am better than you. With that, she turned away. The battle was won. The war was over. Xerus had a queen. And Ethan, he was still standing. The battle was over. Verosk's forces had surrendered, their warlord beaten and humiliated. The canyon where the battle took place was now silent, the smoke clearing to reveal Xerian warriors standing victorious. Ethan stood at the edge of the battlefield, his hands resting on his knees as he caught his breath. He had fought, he had survived, but most of all, he had made a difference. Silara, still in her royal battle armor, approached him. Her golden eyes studied him with an expression he couldn't quite place. You did well, Ethan, she said. Ethan chuckled, still breathing hard. Yeah, not bad for a guy who just wanted to get off this planet. Silara smirked. And now? Ethan hesitated. He had spent so long thinking about leaving, about returning to Earth. But now, Sirius felt different. He wasn't just an outsider anymore. He had fought beside these people. He had helped save their world. Maybe, just maybe, this was where he was supposed to be. The warlord's fate. The surviving generals of Verosk's army were brought to the palace, their hands bound in energy restraints. Verosk himself knelt before the royal court, his once proud armor now dented and broken. "You have lost," Silara said, standing tall on the throne steps. "Sirius is mine, and your reign of terror is over." Verosk sneered. "Kill me and be done with it, Queen." Ethan, standing beside Silara, crossed his arms. "That's what you do, right? Kill anyone who gets in your way." Verosk scowled but said nothing. Silara's voice was firm. "You will not die today, Verosk. Instead, you will live to see Sirius thrive without you." She turned to her guards. "Take him away." Verosk was dragged from the court, his defiant glare never leaving Ethan. As soon as he was gone, the court erupted into cheers. The war was over. Their queen had won. But one question remained: the humans' decision. That evening, a grand celebration filled the capital city. Fires burned in massive torches, music echoed through the streets, and people danced in victory. Ethan sat on the palace balcony, watching the festivities below. It was strange. A week ago, he was just a guy stranded on an alien world. Now he had helped overthrow a warlord. Silara approached, holding 2 cups of Zirian fire wine. She handed one to Ethan and sat beside him. "You are quiet," she said. Ethan took a sip of the drink. "Just thinking." Silara tilted her head. "About leaving." Ethan exhaled. "That was the plan, wasn't it?" She nodded slowly. "And now?" Ethan glanced at her, the way the firelight reflected in her golden eyes, the way she looked at him as if waiting for something more. Maybe it wasn't just the planet he had come to care about. "Honestly," Ethan smirked, "I have no idea." Silara chuckled. "You humans are unpredictable." Ethan grinned. "You like that, don't you?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at the city, at her people celebrating. "Sirius will need rebuilding. The war took much from us." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, but I think you're gonna be a great queen." Silara turned to him. "Perhaps, but even a queen needs trusted allies ****. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering me a job?" Silara smirked. "I am offering you a place here, if you want it." Ethan looked down at the city, then back at Silara. Did he really want to leave? Earth was home, sure. But here, he had a purpose. Here, he had people who needed him. And maybe, just maybe, he had found someone worth staying for. A new beginning. The next morning, as the twin sons of Sirius rose over the palace, Ethan stood before the royal court. The high-ranking nobles and warriors of the kingdom waited, watching. Silara stood before him, regal and proud. "Ethan Carter, the human who fought beside us, who saved this world, will you stay and serve as my advisor?" Ethan took a deep breath. He had spent his life drifting, never staying in one place for long. But this time, he had a reason to stay. He met Silara's gaze and smirked. "Yeah, I think I will." The court erupted in cheers. Ethan Carter had come to Sirius by accident. Now he was staying by choice. And somewhere in the crowd, Silara smiled. The story of a lost human and an alien queen was just beginning.